Hello everyone! I don't know about you, but I thought this March felt awfully long. It just seemed to stretch on and on. It felt like 2 months rolled into one. There was the first half, and then there was the second half, which for me were two entirely different experiences. I mean, in my little world, the first half was dominated by the Snowbound reading project, and then the second half was dominated by some things that were going on at home. Nothing really bad, but my dad injured himself, and then he ended up having surgery, and that really changed some things around here. Did not have as much time to devote to video editing and things, which is why these videos have been later lately. But there's a lot of stress involved this month, and so it's kind of made my brain a little bit wonky. But it's a good thing I keep a list of the movies I watch, and I force myself to write down some notes about each one, or else we would be sunk. This would be a very short video. Hello everyone, I watched some stuff last month, but I don't remember anything about them. Thanks for watching. Bye! Here is what else I saw in March that I didn't already talk about, starting with movie number 1, 1954's Executive Suite, a business drama directed by Robert Wise. When the head of a prominent corporation drops dead in the street, the members of the board vie for the vacant leadership position while debating the solvency and future direction of the company. It's got a star-studded cast featuring William Holden, Frederick March, Barbara Stanwyck, Walter Pidgeon, and June Allison, with Louis Calhern, Shelley Winters, Paul Douglas, Nina Falk, and Dean Jagger. The film reminded me a lot of Patterns, which was originally a teleplay in 1954, same year, and then made into a film in 55. It wasn't so long ago that we watched that film, and the visual and narrative similarities here were striking, although I didn't find Executive Suite as tense. March and Holden are the standouts. March's ambitious numbers guy has a nervous sweat issue and is constantly wiping his hands with damp hankies, while Holden is a personable, hands-on engineer who's so good at working a room he could be a lawyer or politician. What I thought was odd was the quick and relatively easy wrap-up. There's all this drama, all these interpersonal conflicts, competition, and I kept expecting fireworks, an eruption in the boardroom perhaps, and after a lot of build-up, we didn't really get any. Then I was on the lookout for a twist, something ironic or cynical to strike in the last few minutes. But we didn't really get anything like that either. Now, maybe none of this is the movie's fault. It has more to do with modern expectations, and I guess I should be glad it didn't end on a dark, jaded note. But it did feel anticlimactic. The film looked nice, though. It had good photography, and the performances were all fine. I wouldn't expect anything less from a film made by Robert Wise. Movie number 2 was a rewatch of a film I've already done 2 solo reviews of, 2019's Godzilla King of the Monsters, but this time I watched it on Blu-ray. I had been disappointed about the quality of the DVD release, so I wanted to check this out and see how it compared. I didn't really detect a drastic difference between the DVD and the Blu-ray. The quality was superior, but still not as awesome looking as it was when I first saw the movie in the theater. I know I'm never going to recapture that experience, though, and that's okay. I still really like this movie. Yes, there is a sizable number of things that don't make complete sense, loose threads, stuff you have to just accept, but I still love the monsters, and the music, and the spectacle, and all that jazz. Some things I've been critical of in the past I'm still not a big fan of. Other things didn't bother me as much, like Bradley Whitford's incessant quips, for example. They seemed a bit much before, but I didn't mind this time. Another thought I had, and hold on folks, this might sound a little weird, is that Godzilla here kind of fills the same role as a hero in a historical romance. Hear me out. At the peak of a perilous moment, Godzilla is always coming out of nowhere and bursting on the scene with his big heroic theme and rescuing our protagonists just in the nick of time. Every time he shows up, it's like, our hero! All I'm saying is, if this were a period drama, if this was, a Jane Austen adaptation, he'd be the hero. He'd be the male lead. He'd be the knight in shining armor. Godzilla would be Mr. Darcy. I was going to suggest that someone should make a compilation video, a supercut, of every time Godzilla comes to the rescue, set to the song Holding Out for a Hero, but then I looked it up and I found several videos where somebody did such a thing. I am not the first person to have this idea. The videos I found, though, are kind of just Monsterverse in general. The hero in question is Godzilla, but also King Kong. That's not how I would do it. I was thinking just this movie, or maybe all of the movies, all of the Godzilla movies, or at least all the ones where he acts as the good guy. I guess if I want that, I have to make it myself. Movie number 3 is one that was recommended a couple years ago, 1971's Murphy's War, in which Peter O'Toole plays the lone survivor of a British ship that was sunk by a German U-boat, its crew brutally shot to death in the water. Murphy is brought to an island mission to recuperate, but instead of lying still as ordered, he skips out to make repairs on a seaplane that will enable him to hunt the U-boat down. I guess Frank Sinatra was originally going to star in this one, but I can't picture anyone but Peter O'Toole, whose rebellious attitude is as sassy as his brogue. The other featured actors are Sean Phillips, Philippe Noiret, and Horst Janssen. Maybe that's Janssen, I don't know, he's German, I'm just gonna go with Janssen, who don't leave as strong an impression, but play crucial supporting roles. I did think this cat and mouse game seemed a bit stretched out in some places, but the sequence where Murphy tests out his repairs is very thrilling. It felt real. Murphy exhilarated, but also a little freaked out because he doesn't exactly know what he's doing. Movie number 4 is 1951's 14 Hours, a psychological drama set on St. Patrick's Day in which Richard Basehart plays a troubled young man threatening to jump off a hotel's 15th-story ledge if anyone comes near him. New York City police work to coax or trick him inside while a crowd gathers on the street below. We watched a similar movie a year or two ago called Man on a Ledge that starred Sam Worthington. That one had a more complex story, but was much less feasible, whereas this keeps things nice and simple. Henry Hathaway directed this tense picture, and apparently employed all the tools at his disposal to make every shot look as convincing as possible. It sure was convincing enough for my mom, who does not like heights, and really didn't enjoy watching this movie. But while the visuals are impressive, what I think really takes it to another level, I was gonna say elevates the movie, but I thought that was too punny, but then I said takes it to another level, and that really is too punny also. I don't know, there's no better way to say that. What really boosts the movie is the cast and the characters' interactions. Richard Basehart was actually quite a few years older than his character, but he sure looks like a vulnerable kid up there, pleated pant legs flapping in the wind. And Paul Douglas is the true star, playing the beat cop who makes a connection with the potential jumper. Also well cast are Agnes Moorehead and Robert Keith as the parents, and Howard Da Silva as the deputy police chief. And among the onlookers, we have several future stars, Grace Kelly making her feature film debut, Deborah Paget, and Jeffrey Hunter. All of them look gorgeous, of course, and make the most of their small featured roles. They don't have much to do with the main story, but they help make the film more interesting. I really enjoyed this one, and its unexpectedly sweet turn. I just have 2 quibbles. Number 1, I don't think I felt as stressed as I should have, given the intensity of the will-he, won't-he situation. Maybe I was just thinking too logically about the whole thing. And number two, there was something about the way it ended, some implied negligence in procedure, which I didn't like. But again, I was probably applying too much real-world thought instead of letting the movie be a movie. Regardless, I thought it was a great little thriller. Movie number 5 is 1959's Operation Petticoat. Way back when I did my Cary Grant filmography chat, several of you urged me to take a chance on this one after I said I shied away from it. Well, all this time later, I finally watched it, and having seen it, I do think that I was kind of right, that it is pretty silly, but that doesn't mean it isn't fun and clever. Directed by Blake Edwards and set in late December 1941, Grant plays the impatient commanding officer of a submarine in sore need of repairs. He makes a hesitant deal with Tony Curtis's morally questionable supply officer, allowing him to use whatever means he sees fit to obtain necessary materials. Grant is very likable as the captain who gradually finds himself a little beyond his depth, in over his head, underwater. Curtis I found less likable. I just don't like the type character he was playing, the slick opportunist and ladies' man who lie, cheat, and steal to get what he wants. I do think my reaction to the character was more or less what was intended, but I think I was also supposed to find him a charmer in spite of those qualities, and I didn't. As I've explained in the past, I like World War II movies, but I do not care much for military comedies or romances. I enjoy the occasional injection of humor in a war movie. I think that adds to the realism when guys are joking around with each other or funny things happen. But I don't get as into it when comedy is the main purpose, especially in a film that focuses on the military. I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm kind of a disciplinarian. I like order and structure and people following rules and doing what they're supposed to do. Seeing this kind of behavior on board a submarine, especially in wartime, bugs me. Maybe it's because I have servicemen in my family history. I don't know. So this was kind of a mixed bag. Some of it I quite enjoyed as things became more and more outrageous. Other parts I found tedious. With the introduction of the nurses, things really get goofy and it becomes more of a sex comedy, and I rolled my eyes quite a bit. Despite these things, though, I still thought it was a funny movie. I laughed several times, and I'm glad I saw it. Movie number 6 is the 1953 western The Naked Spur, an Anthony Mann-Jimmy Stewart collaboration in which Stewart plays a bounty hunter on a mission to capture an outlaw and collect the $5,000 reward. He teams up with a gold-hungry old-timer and a soldier with dishonorable discharge papers who make odd partners but help him capture his prey. But once they've got the outlaw, can they keep him? Robert Ryan is well cast as the affable but manipulative bad guy, who is especially wily as he turns the men against each other, and Janet Leigh is the feisty waif who is on his side no matter how he treats her. I really enjoyed this one. I think I'd rank it above the other 3 Anthony Mann westerns I've seen to date. For one thing, it's beautiful, gorgeous scenery filmed in the Rocky Mountains and shot in Technicolor no less. The camera takes advantage of all that nature has to offer: jagged, snow-capped peaks, gushing rapids, birch tree forests. It's also a good psychological thriller, a narrative that would work as well in a noirish crime drama as it does in a western. And Jimmy Stewart is particularly good as a man intent on achieving his goal who may have a dark secret. He's a flawed character, struggling with some of the physically demanding tasks and emotionally raw underneath a curt, businesslike exterior. My only quibble is with the score, which was very good most of the time, but for the romantic theme, composer Bronislaw Kaper chose to use the song Beautiful Dreamer. I have nothing against that melody, but I have heard it referenced and sampled in so many things, including Looney Tunes cartoons, that I find it hard to take seriously in this more hardened setting. Besides that minor point, though, it's an excellent film. Movie number 7 is 1965's The Ipcress File. Michael Caine's first outing as spy, Harry Palmer, has him engaged on the hunt for a man suspected of kidnapping British scientists. The story is primarily concerned with a sinister brainwashing plot, which is interesting, but not quite as engaging as the look of the film itself. Two things dominate this movie. One is Caine's character, a low-key spy who doesn't want to be a spy and bucks bureaucratic red tape, whose true interests are cooking and women. The other is its overwhelming sense of style, and I don't mean its inherent 1960s-ness, I'm talking about the way it was filmed. Every other shot is so unique that it grabs your attention, whether it's a peculiar angle, unusual framing, or excessive negative space. The movie itself I found a little slow, a little dull, but as something to look at, it was very exciting. You never knew where they were going to position the camera next. Every shot was a surprise, and some of the creativity in the setups was marvelous. I don't know who deserves credit for this, the director of photography, the production designer, but it's what I will remember most about the film. The rest of the movies on this list are ones I crammed into the last 2 days of the month because they were going to be leaving Prime on the 31st. It would not have been an issue if I missed my chance because I could rent them easily enough, but would I actually do it? Or would it just be another one of those cans I kick down the road saying, oh yeah, I should do that sometime. Oh, I gotta finish that series. Oh, I've always meant to watch those. Probably. That would probably be the case. So I beasted my way through these 5 films, dragging my mom and dad along with me. Movie number 8 is 2000's Mission Impossible 2, directed by John Woo, in which Tom Cruise's IMF agent Ethan Hunt is tasked with getting his hands on a deadly virus that has been stolen by his new girlfriend's ex. Last month, and by that I mean the month before last month, February, this always gets confusing, I watched the first Mission Impossible film, and while I liked it, I wasn't sure about continuing on with the series. But thanks to your helpful and enlightening responses regarding the quality of the series over time, I was encouraged to check the others out after all. So I want to thank you all for contributing to that discussion. Most of you were of the opinion that Mission Impossible 2 is the worst of the series, and I have to say, I didn't care for it either. A lot of you pointed out that the director makes a huge difference here, and you're spot on. As many of you are already aware, the first 3 films were each made by a different director known for a particular style, and that style is so dominant that it determines the feel of the film, the look of the film, how the viewer responds to the film, even though so many other factors remain the same throughout the first 3 films. This entry was directed by John Woo, and I guess I don't like his style. Not the overused slow motion, not the prolonged fight scenes, not the cheesy somersault-heavy choreography, and not the random flocks of birds. The main plot was kind of interesting. You have a deadly, contagious virus that's been created in a lab that's going to be unleashed on the public to create demand for a cure that the pharmaceutical company already has in its possession so that investors will make a fat profit. That's something I've never heard of before, but they didn't do as much with that as I had hoped, spending more time on the secret agent love triangle, which is essentially the plot of 1946's Notorious. Now, I didn't think this was totally awful. There was some confusion, but not as much as with the first film, and I guess some of its issues are the consequence of heavy editing. The original cut was 3.5 hours long. As it was, the second half of this seemed to go on and on and on. The beach fight was especially tedious. I was so bored, and it's not a good sign for your action movie when the viewers start saying, "Oh no, not another chase, shootout, hand-to-hand combat scene. Ugh!" I also didn't care for Hans Zimmer's score and his rendition of the main theme, and they did the face mask thing way too much. The last time they pulled that trick was especially ridiculous. Either Ethan is able to see the future and know exactly what's going to happen and plan ahead for it, or he's running around with perfect replicas of people's faces shoved into his pockets in case he needs one of them. It's absurd. I mean, I know it's kind of like a signature thing for these movies, but I found it difficult to swallow in the first one. Here, it was just like, come on. I did like Anthony Hopkins' brief appearance, though, and his delivery of the "it's not mission difficult, it's mission impossible" line. Thandie Newton played an appealing heroine, and it was nice to see Ving Rhames back as part of Ethan's team. For the most part, though, this one didn't do much for me. For what it's worth, my mom liked it a little better than I did, because she's nicer than me, and because she liked the virus storyline. But she was also bored by the fight scenes and the slow motion. As for my dad, he was so disappointed in the first movie that he chose not to join us. I don't normally plow through sequels like this, but I was on a mission of my own, so movie number 9 is 2006's Mission Impossible 3, directed by J.J. Abrams. Ethan Hunt is on his way to settling down to civilian life with his fiancée when he's called out of retirement to rescue another IMF agent who has fallen into the clutches of a ruthless arms dealer. I liked this one much better. About half an hour or 45 minutes in, I turned to my mom and said, "Hey, this is actually a good movie." I like the cast. I was pleased to see Ving Rhames come back yet again, alongside a host of new, interesting characters. Philip Seymour Hoffman stands out as a memorable, creepy villain. The personal storyline is compelling, and the narrative maintains interest throughout, taking twists and turns, but without becoming confusing to the point of alienating the viewer. I've never been enamored of J.J. Abrams' work, and you can definitely tell he made this, but I think he did a fine job in his feature directorial debut. There are a number of cool action scenes. I never contemplated the idea of a chopper chase through a windmill farm, but it was an ingenious setting, and the sequence is even more intense because of the pacing and the fact there are two things going on at once. The last movie so overused the wearing someone else's face as a mask trick that it became a joke. Here, it's used sparingly in a pivotal sequence. It's not just a piece of cake, and the way it's done is clever, suspenseful, and informative, showing how the whole thing works, and making it convincing again. The film's energetic and engaging, it looks good, it's the first one where Tom Cruise does a noteworthy amount of running, and I liked Michael Giacchino's music. He had a good take on Lalo Schifrin's original theme, and then used phrases and instrumentation from that throughout the entire score, which helped the movie feel more cohesive with itself, with the previous films, with the original series. All in all, it felt like, yep, this is a Mission Impossible movie. So, third time's the charm for me, and based on what a lot of you said, it only gets better from here. I've seen the first 3 now. I wanted to try to squeeze the 4th one in, wasn't able to, but that's okay. I have turned the corner. Good thing I didn't stop at 2. I've turned the corner. I'm on board with watching number 4. I don't know if it'll happen this month or next month or, in the immediate future, but it's going to happen. I plan to watch the rest of the series all in good time. So that's good, and I want to thank you all again for providing some very useful insight. And lastly, movies number 10 through 12 are Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. I'd never watched any of these films in their entirety before. I'll pause for the obligatory gasp. You never seen Indiana Jones before? What, do you live under a rock? No, we just didn't watch them in our family. We had the music on a John Williams CD, but my mom never brought the movies home, either when they first came out or later, and none of us sought them out when we were older and picking movies on our own at the library. It's just one of those things. Just like there are movies that I grew up with and have seen many times that I'm sure some of you have never watched. To clarify, though, I had seen the opening sequence of Raiders 2 or 3 times and seen portions of Temple of Doom, and I did see all of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. That's probably an unfortunate circumstance and maybe a reason why I never sought out the original trilogy. Or maybe it has something to do with the fact that I got sick of the music. First we played it in band, and I was like, ooh, you know what? This is pretty repetitive. And then, a couple years later, I had a roommate who played the music all the time, and I just got sick of the sound of it. Or maybe I was just influenced by my mom's lack of interest. But seeing these films is something I've been meaning to cross off my to-do list, and while they were on Prime, it seemed dumb not to take advantage of the opportunity, so I watched all 3 of them with my dad, who had also never seen them before. Mom was present also, but she went to sleep on the first 2. Not a big deal, she had seen them before, or at least seen most of them before, and like I said, she's not into them. But I did like them, and I did stay awake through all 3 of them. My dad stayed awake, we had a good time. Mom was awake for the 3rd one. You really can't fault her. Last week was a difficult week. It was strange and stressful and exhausting. Neither of them has been sleeping very well, so if she was able to get 2 good hours of sleep from each of these movies, then she can have it. She deserves it. And I'm just amazed that she was able to sleep, because these are noisy films. They are loud. We had the volume up. They are chaotic, and I got a little noisy watching a couple scenes. So, kudos to her for being able to just conk out through all of that ruckus. Anyway, movie number 10, 1981's Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, set in 1936, has archaeologist and Professor Dr. Indiana Jones racing to beat the Nazis to the discovery of the lost Ark of the Covenant. What we have is a pretty simple story, but it's constantly mixing things up and building momentum. Harrison Ford's Dr. Jones is easy to like. He's an action hero, kind of an old-timey swashbuckler. He's a cool guy, he's kind of a ladies' man, but he somehow still feels like a real person. He gets irritated, he gets tired, he makes mistakes, he's not the Energizer Bunny, and when he pulls off a particularly incredible stunt, even he seems surprised that it worked as well as it did. I already knew that Marion Ravenwood, played by Karen Allen, is considered the best of Indy's leading ladies, and I think that's with good reason. Her pluckiness, quick thinking, and knowledgeability make her a superior match for him. You know what I definitely didn't like, though? The snakes! I did not like the snakes. I knew there were going to be snakes in these movies. There always are. It's one of those obligatory things. But good grief! I didn't know it was going to be like that. Yeah, that one sequence was actually kind of a couple sequences in the Well of Souls, or whatever it was called. That felt very long to me, and it doesn't matter that probably at least half of those snakes were fake. They were still snakes, and there were plenty that were alive and moving around, and it was just so... just thinking about it makes me feel... But on the flip side of yuckiness, the climax, which I knew was coming, I'd seen clips of it several times before, was awesome. I am selectively squeamish, so I'm able to enjoy a satisfyingly gruesome face melting or head explosion as much as anybody else, as long as it's not too gory and realistic. Movie number 11, 1984's Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, actually takes us back a year to 1935. I did not pick up on that, but my father did. Indiana Jones, accompanied by a little boy and a nightclub singer, goes after a sacred stone that has been stolen from an Indian village. A lot of people seem to consider this the weakest entry in the trilogy, their main criticism being that the sidekicks are too annoying. I get that complaint to a certain extent, but I think both Willie and Short Round eventually grow on you if you allow them to. Willie, played by Kate Capshaw, Spielberg's future wife, is certainly whiny, and the amount of time she spends complaining, screaming, and being helpless is off-putting, and she can be annoying. But come on, let's be real. If I were in her place, I am sure that I would be fussing and shrieking and freaking out and getting in the way just as much. As for Short Round, Ke Huy Quan is super cute. He does a really good job for someone so young and totally inexperienced, and I really like the warmth of the relationship between him and Indy. Now, of course, with his recent huge comeback, sweeping all the awards for Best Supporting Actor, it alters the perspective. I love the turn his real-life fairy tale has taken, and I don't know if there was anyone happier for him at the Academy Awards than Steven Spielberg and Harrison Ford. Now, with all that said, I don't think I enjoyed this one as much as the first one. The second half ran on a bit long, and it didn't culminate in as startling and memorable a climax. I got a little weary of the succession of dilemmas, booby traps, and chase scenes, and I found I picked up on the rhythm of the writing fairly easily, and then I began to anticipate what the next quip or the next incident was going to be. They kept the more formulaic scenes interesting, though, by having two different things occur simultaneously, that kept things fresh, chaotic, exciting, and more real. The snake rating isn't as bad for this one. I think Raiders takes the cake. It's just screen time and sheer volume of snakes, but there were still a couple moments here that made me shudder. However, these were also some of my favorite scenes, like the one where Indy and Short Round are playing poker while Willie runs around screaming, and the dinner scene where exposition unfolds over tense conversation, but at the same time the sidekicks are reacting with horror to a succession of exotic delicacies. The moment that probably made me cringe the most, though, was when a giant centipede, or maybe it was a millipede at that point, who's counting, crawled up Willie's back and her shoulder and went under her hair onto her neck. That just, I have goosebumps just thinking about it. Number 12, 1989's Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, has Jones going in search of his father, whose lifelong quest to find the legendary Holy Grail has led to his sudden disappearance. Considered by many the best of the trilogy, this one has a lot in common with the first one. It brings back Denholm Elliott, who gets to take part in the adventure this time, and John Rhys-Davies. The MacGuffin is another Judeo-Christian artifact. Both movies have Nazis. And the script more or less repeats the established formula of ups and downs, fights, pursuits, booby traps, riddles, and creepy crawly things. One major difference, I think, is that this one has the most heart. Indy and his dad, Dr. Henry Jones, reconciling after many years of estrangement. Sean Connery brings a lot to the movie. I enjoyed him in the lighthearted but dry comedic role, and I thought he and Ford bounced off each other very well. Also really good was the opening prologue, which is a departure from the norm that gives us an origin story of sorts by showing young Indiana on an early adventure. I thought this part was great, and River Phoenix did an excellent job capturing Harrison Ford's mannerisms. I wasn't as interested in the MacGuffin in this one, and I felt like the end required even more of a stretch than usual. I also correctly guessed several of the twists, which was disappointing. I'd prefer to be surprised by villain reveals, not proven right about my predictions. And there was a point, as was the case with the previous two movies, where I got restless and was ready for it to move on to the next thing. Here it was the whole tank sequence. But the scenes with the two Doctors Jones were highlights, as was the climactic fright scene, its freaky effects harkening back again to the first film. The Last Crusade is the one I knew the least about and most wanted to see, and I wasn't disappointed. I do think I liked the first one the best, awful snake scene notwithstanding, but I feel like they're all pretty equal, really. What's funny is that the three of us each had a different favorite. So there you go. Watching the three of them in close succession, you do become more aware of a certain amount of predictability and repetition. The formula becomes quite obvious. It succeeds, though, because the characters are engaging, the settings are diverse, the dialogue is fun, and in just about every aspect, they're well-made films. And you know what was really nice? Watching the movies with my dad. This was a fun departure from the usual war movies and noirs and mystery thrillers, and while he found the whole thing pretty silly, I think, he did have a good time, and we both enjoyed the movies themselves, and we enjoyed watching them together, and the distraction at the end of a challenging week was a welcome one. So those are my thoughts on Indiana Jones and all the other movies that I saw last month. I hope you enjoyed this video, and by all means, if you have any thoughts on any of the films that I discussed, go ahead and share them in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you all have to say, and it is my intention to post another video this week on Saturday, the way it's supposed to be, so I'm aiming for that, and if all goes according to plan, I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.